Today, we're going to do something a little bit different, a little variety. Normally when an engine's on this stand and I'm standing in front of it talking, it's done. We know it's a bad engine. We're going to tear it completely apart all the way down. We're going to salvage the good parts, recycle the rest, and try to figure out what happened in the process. But in this case, this is a suspected bad engine. It's out of a 2010 Nissan Xterra with about 200,000 miles on it, a VQ40DE. It's a 4-liter all-aluminum V6, 260 or 70 horsepower, something like that. And these are pretty desirable engines. When I say that, I mean there's a decent amount of demand for them because they do go wrong. These engines do fail. But the story I got with this engine leaves me with some doubt as to whether this engine is actually bad, which is why we're going to go through all the tests that I would normally do on an engine or a vehicle that comes in that I can't get running to verify an engine is in good shape so that I feel comfortable selling it. And if we find something wrong, well, then we know we have a teardown in the future. So I really don't think I can get hurt here. If this engine's good, it's worth $1,000, $1,200. If the engine's bad, we get a teardown, and I paid bad price for it. So no one's going to get hurt here, at least I hope not. The story that I got with this engine is that this 2010 Xterra was being driven across the country, and the transmission failed somewhere around the St. Louis area. They had it towed to a shop, which condemned the transmission. They stated that the radiator, the transmission cooler in the radiator had failed. It's a pretty common problem on the Frontiers, Pathfinders, and Xterras from this era. And when that happens, coolant and transmission fluid mix, turns into this Pepto-Bismol looking stuff that isn't transmission fluid, and it will wreck these transmissions. That's why these transmissions are like $2,000, $2,500, and there's not a lot of them available. And when this vehicle was then dismantled and processed by the yard that I bought this engine from, they said the oil looked like it had coolant in it. And I'm not doubting that statement. I am kind of doubting that statement. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible for this to have a bad engine and transmission. I have bought cars with bad engines and transmissions. It's totally possible, but the likelihood is pretty low, and it gave me enough doubt to look into it a little further without just assuming the engine's bad. The last thing I want to do is tear down a good engine. So today we're going to do a bunch of tests on it. Unfortunately, I can't do a compression test. I don't have a starter or a bell housing, but I can do a leak down test. We can look at the plugs. We can cut the filter open and look at the media of the filter. I can pull the lower oil pan, maybe pull one rod cap off and take a look at the rod bearing. We can pull the timing inspection plates, take a look at the timing system, see if the guides are intact. I have my borescope. We're going to see if this engine's good. Now, if I find any faults along the way, any issues at all, this will be a teardown in the future. If I don't find any problems, maybe I'll sell the engine. Maybe I've got a good engine. Now, obviously, without hearing it run, there's some things that I can't tell. Does it have good oil pressure? Does it overheat? Is there a crack in the head that only opens up when it's at operating temperature? There's a lot of what ifs, which is why this engine is going to have to be priced below what I would normally sell something out of one of my running vehicles for. But at the same time, if I do all of those tests and everything comes back positive, I don't have any reason to suspect the engine's bad. The first thing I'm going to do is turn it over. Now, I know this engine will turn over, at least I suspect it will, because all of the bolts came out for the torque converter on the flywheel, which means that they were able to turn the engine over enough for that to happen. Plus, it was supposedly running still when they got it. So now, let's see how it feels. Well, there's compression. There's another compression. Okay, so I suppose that's the first test. It turns over. It feels like it's got compression. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the oil filter. We'll take a look at the oil that's in there, and we'll cut it apart and look at the media. All right, we're going to pull this filter off, I think. Okay, well, that just looks like oil to me. Yeah, that's just oil. I don't see anything else in there yet. Let's get this thing cut open. Every time I get one of these filters to cut open, it's dented in a way where I can't just pull the cartridge out. Every time. Well, here's the oil. There's the spring. The oil looks pretty good that's in the filter. See how we can get this apart, pull the caps off. I don't know if that's going to be that easy or not. Probably not. I don't really think this is a big enough filter to cut. This seems dangerous. Yeah, I better not. All right, we're going to have to make do. Okay, I cut it with the saw. I don't really want to cut it again. If I could just pull it out of this cap, I'd be very happy right now. Okay, so I tried to cut it, and it was terrible. But I got enough of a sample here that we can take a look at. So there's what the oil looks like. And here's the media. I don't really see any chunks of metal. There's that's from the saw. But so far, so good. The next thing that we're going to do is pull the upper intake plenum because I want to get all the coils and plugs out. We're going to look at the plugs. We're going to get them out so that we can do a leak down test. All right, that should be everything. There's the intake. We'll set this over here. We're going to see if we can take a look at these intake ports. Valves look good there. They look good there. Look pretty decent there. Looks pretty good there. Pretty good there. Yeah, I don't really see any cause for concern yet. Now we'll pull the coils and plugs. You know what? We're just going to leave that one plugged in. And bad stuff's happening. Just going to let that one hang out there. Put these back to where they go. Well, the plugs look pretty good. They're all the right plugs, which is good. It's a 200,000 mile vehicle, so who knows how old they actually are. They do have quite a bit of gap, but they are consistently colored. They all look pretty similar. I don't see any damage. No signs of concern yet. So now it's time to do some testing. So far, all we've done is inspection, and we're going to do a leak down test. Now, you can do a compression test if there's a starter or a way to turn the engine over fast enough. I don't have that way. Plus, I prefer leak down test. I feel like they offer more information if there is a problem. So we're going to start by threading the adapter into the cylinder. And what we're basically going to do is pump air into the cylinder, turn the engine over until the number starts rising, which, there we go, now we're tight. And we're trying to look to see how much air is getting past the rings, past the valves. If the cylinder's at top dead center, and it's got a lot of leak down, 50, 60, 70%, we know that there's a problem. If we see a good leak down number, 7, 8%, something around there, and we go down each cylinder and they're all the same, then it's going to look pretty good. So now we're going to get the actual tester, and you do need a compressed air for this. Now there are many different brands of leak down testers. You don't have to get the over-the-counter type. You can get pretty much any of them, and they will tell you some good information. All right, now I believe I have this at top dead center. This may shoot my breaker bar off and hurt me very badly. It's fine. Yep, but it didn't hurt me, so it's fine. All right, let's try this again. I got the bigger breaker bar on here. So that's pretty good leak down numbers. If there's a problem, you'll see this will struggle to get anywhere near here. This will sit at 15, 20. I've got a 5-cylinder Atlas that has a pitted, I think it's an intake valve seat, and the best it gets to is about 30. So it's got 70% leak down. In this case, we have less than 10. All right, let's go on to the next. We're going to have to turn the engine over some. I can hear the air rushing past the intake valve because it's partially open. There you go. Same results as the previous cylinder. I will mention this too. Ideally, you want to get the cylinder at top dead center before you do all this, but since I'm doing every cylinder, I just turn the engine over until you can literally hear and feel and see that the piston is reaching top dead center. Pretty good. Now, if you had a problem and say it was sitting at 50 or 60, you would be able to hear where that air is going. You'd hear it coming out of the intake port, you hear it coming out of the exhaust port, or you take the oil cap off, you'll be able to hear it there depending on where you're losing air. And next. I can't see what's happening yet. That's pretty good. So this is not good. We got some problems here. So now we're going to have to verify that it's at TDC with the valves closed and figure out where we see this air going. All right, so I'm going to use this long extension as a dowel. And we're going to turn this over till it's at its peak. Right there. Okay, I have verified that the intake valves are closed by looking at them. I mean, they're as closed as they should be. And now we'll connect the leak down tester back up and see if we get a different reading, but then we'll actually listen to where the problem is. Okay. Exhaust valve. I can hear it. So let's buzz this exhaust manifold off, see if we can figure out why. It could just be hung up on some stuff, maybe a simple fix. All right, so now we're looking at the exhaust. It's hard for my camera to focus on both at the same time. We're going to try to rig this light up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray some glass cleaner in here, and we're going to see which valve is the problem. It's unlikely that both are, but it is possible if the engine is out of time, which is also a possibility. So now we'll spray that in. We'll hook up the leak down tester, which pushed air in the cylinder, and if there's anything leaking by, we'll be able to see it. All right, so this is kind of a challenge for me. We're going to put air in the cylinder, and then we're going to, we'll be able to hear it. So it's coming from one of those two. Let's get some glass cleaner. Okay. Well, it looks like it's coming out of both. So I'm going to turn this engine over just a hair, and we're going to see if we can get that to stop. Okay, so that's, there we go. So those aren't closing all the way. So it could be that there's some junk It looks like one is significantly worse than the other. The left one here, the rear valve. So at this point, I think we're going to pull the valve cover off, and we're going to see if we have any play between the bucket and the cam when the lobe is pointed away. Because if those are not returning to their seat, there should be a gap there. Well, we just have a few things to get out of the way. All right, this should be almost enough to get this out of the way. I think that's enough. Well, I guess there's a good look inside the top of the crankcase. Looks pretty good, actually. This is yet another way to verify that the cams are not engaged, that the lobes are pointed away from the buckets. We are at TDC, cams are pointed away. We're going to do the test once again and verify everything, and then we'll see if we can fix it. All right, let's see what happens now. I'm sure it's going to be the exact same. See, now I hear it on the intake. The cams are absolutely not engaged. The lobes are pointed away. We're just going to push on these buckets ever so gently. I think it's that one. What I'm doing is pushing the bucket down by hand. We can always spray something down the intake, and let's try that actually. Maybe we can isolate which valve is the problem. Well, what's interesting is they're both kind of going crazy. But if we come over here, you will see that the cams are not engaged, which means that those valves aren't seated. We can also tell by putting a feeler gauge, I suppose, between the cam and the bucket. Now we're going to break out the old bore scope here. See if we can see what's going on in these. Will you go down in the hole? The valves are open. I turned the engine over. And I can't really see. There's a bunch of glass cleaner in there. It's very inconsequential, really. If you would just go to the other valve camera. All right, so there's the edge of the valve there. I don't really see too much junk in there. It doesn't look too bad. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this up with some solvent, maybe some gasoline, and let it sit overnight. Maybe it'll eat away at some of the carbon. I see this a lot with engines that sit for some time. This engine's been on my shelf for like 6 months. Now, sometimes you can give them a big old smack and knock them loose. It'll compress or destroy whatever debris is holding it open. But in this situation, I don't really have good access to these buckets. The cam and head design doesn't really lend itself to that, and I really don't want to risk damaging anything. So we're going to try the solvent method. So I've got the leak down tester hooked back up. What I did is I sprayed a bunch of brake clean in there, and I have a long brush I jammed in there, and I did my best to clean it. And now we're going to turn this over. Oh, and it's fighting me. I think we're good. We're getting there. Let's do this from another vantage point so that we can see what the actual numbers are. Okay. It doesn't quite get as high, and I can still hear stuff coming past the intake, which tells me that I still need to do a little more cleaning, but we're getting close. It's pretty good, but I can still hear it coming past the intake. So I'm going to do a little more cleaning. We're going to see if we can get this as good as we can. I think we can get it better. All right, I turned the engine over to where the valves are now open. Give it a good bath brake clean. Try to clean this the best we can. It's not going to be perfect. This is way too big a brush for what I really want to do. I can't find anything smaller. And I could remove this lower manifold and make it a little easier, but that's more work. Should probably do that. I bet if I let this sit overnight with some gas in here or something else that can eat up carbon, that it'll get even better. And this is like I said, it's a pretty common thing when engines sit for a while. All right, now we're going to turn this thing over. I'm actually going to use the leak down tester to hopefully blow up or blow out everything that's in that cylinder. You'll notice it immediately, or not. All right, we're going to let that. I just don't want that water that liquid creating a false positive, because it could. Obviously, we still have air coming through there. I'm just going to let it run, let the compressor run. It looks like we're at about 10% leak down, which is a little more than I like, but it's a lot better than it was, because before it was at like 80 to 85% leak down. Whoa, gotta watch out there. That's pretty good. Yeah, it's good now. I don't hear any air coming past the intake. We must have gotten whatever was holding those valves open out of there. Probably just a little bit of carbon. See if we can replicate that. No, we're good. Yeah. That's like 5-6% leak down. That's good. I feel good about that. Now we have one more cylinder. And this engine passes a leak down test. It does not mean it's good. It just means it's not bad in that way. I normally see that type of work needed to get valves to seat on direct injected engines, but also engines that sit for some time can have the same problem. We're getting close. Oh yeah, we're good. Sweet, this engine passes the leak down test. Now we can get this valve cover back on. Be careful with the gasket. I think most people, when they put a used engine in, reseal them anyway. I still want to be careful. That's not going anywhere.
Okie dokie, that's back together.
Next, we're going to remove the drain bolt, I think. Yes. Now this is where the dismantler said it looked like there was coolant in the oil. And I don't see it. That is regular old, not even that dirty oil. If there was coolant in there with the time this engine was sitting, it likely would have separated a little and it would have come out first. We'll let that drain for a little bit, and then we're going to get the bore scope out again. The next thing I'd like to do is take a look at the timing system. Thankfully, these VQ40s and other VQ engines have some inspection covers. So we're going to get this idler bracket out of the way and get those off. It's fine. It's fine. Well, here's a pretty good indicator of the guide's condition, the chain. This all looks pretty good in here. I don't see a lot of varnish in here. It looks like this was a pretty well-maintained engine. I don't see any forbidden glitter anywhere, but we didn't think we'd see that. And then on this side, the water pump, that looks good. Doesn't look like it's been leaking. And if you go way up there, you can kind of see the bottom of the guide, and that looks like it's in pretty good shape. It was definitely worth peeling these off to see what the inside of the timing system looked like, although it doesn't show us everything. So there's a few things that I can't really access. I suppose I could pull these covers off But I'm going to have a better look at the pickup, and if I find guide material in the pickup, then perhaps we'll take more apart. But if it looks clean, I'm not going to mess with it. There's some problems that these engines have with the secondary change, which are back here and back here. And apparently there was a manufacturing defect where the dies that stamped the chain links got worn, and it was usually something that would show itself before 200,000 miles. And predominantly it's on the earlier engines. It's not as common on the later ones. This is a 2010. I think this is the last year that they were affected. And at 200,000 miles, if it were going to be a problem, I think it would have been a problem by now, and it's likely either been addressed or it just won't be a problem on this engine. But now at this point, the last thing I'd like to do is we'll flip it over and we'll put the borescope up the drain plug hole. Sounds wrong. And we'll take a look at the pickup and see if there's any debris in it. Hopefully this doesn't make a mess. I really hope this doesn't make a mess. Oh, it's making a mess. That's just coolant. You know what? I think I can do it from this vantage point. I don't need to go all the way upside down. Okay, let's take a look. This feels kind of wrong. All right, where are you, pickup? You should be in this area. Oh, I think I see it. And yeah, I know I could take this bottom pan off, but why when I can do it this way? Oh, that's the head of a bolt. That's not the pickup. I can kind of see the crankshaft. It looks pretty good in here. It's going to take a hot minute. There's the pickup. Okay, I can see the tube for the pickup. It looks like it's facing the other way. That's going to be fun. All right, well, I've cammed all over this engine inside. I don't see any issues whatsoever. It looks good. It looks clean. There's nothing in the pickup. There's no chunks of chain guide or material in here. I think I'm out of test to run. At this point, it's time to put everything back together. I know it's going to be weird putting an engine together on the stand. I'm not just playing this in reverse. Now I need to clean the surfaces here. Now I understand someone else, whoever buys this engine, may be in here again, but I'm also not going to bank on that. All right, I'm going to get this cleaned up and we'll get those resealed. Now it's time to get some RTV on here, get these resealed. This has a little groove in. The idea is to get the sealant in that groove without getting too crazy. Wipe up a little excess here. I don't want to go too crazy cinching these down, but now the exhaust manifold. Next we'll get the rear plugs in it. Not going crazy on them. Okay, we are back together. this really was a no-lose situation. Worst case scenario, I would have found some problem with the engine, and then we'd have a VQ40 to tear down on the channel, which I've been asked to tear one of these engines down for years. Best case scenario, and I think that's what happened here, is that we didn't find any problems with the engine, and I have an engine that I can sell with a warranty and with some confidence. I don't like to just shoot from the hip, which is why I got as in-depth as I did. I understand that I couldn't hear this engine run, and some of the cars and vehicles I get in here, they're hit too hard, and I cannot hear them run no matter how much time I put into them, which is why we do leak down tests, which is why we have a bore scope. These are the reasons why we dig into these engines so that I don't sell a bad engine. The whole goal is to sell things that are good, and in the last 11 or 12 months, in 2023, I've had one engine return. It's that 3-valve, 4.6-liter Mustang engine, and I don't really think it's bad, and I'm going to dig into it and probably resell it. This engine didn't have anything wrong with it that I could find. The filter looked good. The oil had no signs of water in it, which was the original complaint. The plugs looked good. Eventually, it passed a leak down test, and I understand something held those valves open. It was likely some debris when I pulled the intake because it wasn't the very first one that I did, or maybe it was some carbon because this engine sat on the shelf for at least 6 or 7 months here, and who knows how long before I got it. Regardless, I didn't see anything, and there's no red flags. I think this is a good engine, albeit it is a higher mileage engine, 203,000 miles on it, not most people's first choice, but it also won't be priced like a low mileage unit, and I don't think I'll have any trouble selling it. But now that I have an engine to sell, I'm hoping that I can get someone's actually bad VQ40 so that we can actually have one of these engines to tear all the way down. I know these engines don't last forever. I've seen several bad ones, and I don't want to tear down a good one. The last thing I want to do on this channel is to tear down a good engine, and we didn't do that today. Instead, we saved one out of the scrap pile to put back into service, and I think that's pretty important. Now, I understand that it may be a little bit of a head scratcher as to why a yard would discard an engine without digging into it any deeper, but this is a 200,000 mile engine. It's a pretty common engine. It's not an $8,000 or $10,000 engine. Most yards aren't going to put the labor hours, the manpower into doing what I just did. But I have you all to watch these things, and I hate waste, which is exactly why I dove into it. And now we have an engine to sell. So I think it came out all right. So if you'd like to buy this engine, or if you'd like to buy parts off of anything else I've torn down, you can go to importapart.com, or I'll leave our email in the video description. I know this wasn't the normal teardown video, but it's also not a Saturday night, although you might watch this on a Saturday. I never remember that. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.